All right, folks. If you're just joining us, please introduce yourself in the chat. You can also include your affiliation if you are with any particular organization. And let us get started here. So today we're very excited to have with us Jessica Dandridge Smith, who is the Executive Director of the Water Collaborative of Greater New Orleans. She's going to be talking to us in just a few minutes. The title of her presentation is Community-Led Adaptation and Mitigation as the Core to Water Justice and Climate Resilient Strategies. This program is brought to you by our management team, of which I am a member. I'm the Executive Director of the Wetlands Discovery Center here in Houma. We also have Maida Owens, who is the Folklife Program Director of Louisiana Division of the Arts, Dr. Rachel Doherty, who is at the Center for Louisiana Studies at the University of Louisiana Lafayette. And of course, you just heard a little bit from Dr. Gary LaFleur, who is the R.E. Miller Endowed Professor of Honors Studies, Professor of Biology over at Nicholls State University. This is sort of our disclaimer slide that says, we don't support one adaptation or management strategy in particular. We're really here to have some of the difficult discussions that need to take place because we live in coastal Louisiana. We're a very vulnerable part of our state. And so this is a space where we can have those conversations and hopefully get to a place that can help solve some of those challenges. Thank you so much to our partners. So that's Folklife in Louisiana, Wetlands Discovery Center, Louisiana Folklore Society, Center for Bayou Studies over at Nicholls, and the Center for Louisiana Studies over at ULL. And of course, we could not do this without the support of our funders. And so money for this program comes from the National Endowment for the Arts, BETNEP, we were just talking about a little bit earlier, the National Wildlife Federation, M.J. Sindler Family Fund for Culture and Media, Louisiana Office of Cultural Development through the Louisiana Division of the Arts, and of course, Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities. Now we'd like to talk a little bit about the Passing It On workshops through the Louisiana Folklife program. And so I would like to hand this over to Ms. Maida Owens.
I'm happy to say that we've had a wonderful season, a spring and summer series of workshops. We only have one more left and could advance it. The one is by Tammy Greer, and she's going to talk about mounds and mound complexes on Friday, June 29th. And in the chat, I'm putting.
Oh, Maida, I think we lost your audio.
Oh,
yeah,
I put in the chat the details about it, and on the same page you can find about all the other Passing It On workshops that we've been doing. We anticipate getting more next year, but we'll announce that when that's available.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. And please, if you're on the Zoom with us, please check out some of those programs. They really are wonderful. I myself have participated in a few and wish that I could get to more of them. They're so valuable for our communities. So here is a agenda of how the rest of today is going to go. We're going to hear from Ms. Jessica Dandridge Smith in just a few minutes. We will have a question and answer period with her. We're then going to ask her what her hope for the coast is. We'll give you a little bit information about the working groups that are a part of the BCC. We'll open this up for announcements, anybody that would like to share anything, and then we'll have an informal discussion from 1 o'clock to 1:30. So we hope that everybody can stick around for that as well. So a couple months back, I had the privilege of attending a meeting. It was the Environmental Defense Fund that put this together, and one of the guest speakers there was Jessica Dandridge Smith. And at this workshop, I guess, this work is tough. All of you guys know that. And listening to Jessica talk was inspiring. and energizing, and it got me excited about the work again. And so we thought it very appropriate that she be able to talk to our group here. She is the executive director of the Water Collaborative of Greater New Orleans, and she's here today to present community-led adaptation and mitigation as the core to water justice and climate resiliency strategies. Jessica, thank you so much for being with us today. It's an honor to have you. Thank you for the work you do. I can't sing you enough praises of everything that you do. So thanks for being here with us today.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Jonathan. This is very exciting. I think I told the team yesterday that I love talking to local Louisianians. I talk to a lot of people internationally on this work, but it's very meaningful to share this work with people who are from the community. I don't want to get further ado. I'm going to get started. I'm going to share my screen, y'all. Maida taught me how to do it the right way. So there we go. Perfect. So again, Jessica Dandridge Smith. I've been the executive director of Water Collaborative actually 5 years in a week now. It's been official. So time flies. I started about 6 months or so, 7 months before COVID. And it's been a whirlwind ever since, and I've really enjoyed it. But without further ado, this photo, I'm a Polaroid enthusiast when I'm not doing this work, and I love taking Polaroids. So the one that you see to the right is actually that the confluence in Cairo, Illinois, between the Ohio River and the Mississippi River, in which we then get both of those rivers as one. And I love this Mark Twain, even though I'm not like a Mark Twain reader, be very frank, so don't ask me like another, like, what's your favorite Mark Twain? But no, but what I will say is I always love this quote, it has its own way. Mississippi River will always have its own way. No engineering skill can persuade it to do otherwise. And I think as long as I've done this work, I think we've been under the misconception that we can control the river. And really the mission of the organization is about living and thriving with water. And so how do we live with the Mississippi River? And in many ways return to our indigenous roots, but doing that in the context of 2024, right? Or the 21st century. That's the real challenge. And so I just wanted to kind of start that off with kind of grounding us in kind of my thought as well as the organization's thought. Before we jump in, I'm not going to go into my whole resume, but these are photos of me and my life. I've been a youth organizer. I started after Hurricane Katrina, so you see a few photos of me. I think I look pretty good. I think I look the same, but I started as a youth organizer at 16 years old. Actually, Katrina hit the day before my 16th birthday, so it was a shaping moment for me and really changed the trajectory of my life, where I said, you know, I really went from being really interested in anthropology and history to really being interested in social justice and community development. Wrote my first grant for CERNA for $100,000 by the age of 18, and kind of stayed in this nonprofit trajectory. When I'm not doing that, I'm a Louisiana girl through and through. Up there is one of my smothered okra and seafood that my grandmother, actually there's a photo of her helping me make that, smother down my okra below. Actually, I should also say my family's from Breaux Bridge, Louisiana. So while I claim New Orleans, I byway through Breaux Bridge. Celestine is my family last name, so we are deeply rooted over there. My mom and me, we're basically twins. And my grandfather is a unique experience because he's actually Jamaican. My grandfather actually opened the first Jamaican restaurant in New Orleans back in the 80s, when people didn't know what jerk chicken was. He had to call it something different. So that was him. He opened his first restaurant. That's a picture of that. So anyway, this is just a little bit of scope. My husband's a saxophonist, so you see him at the very bottom right, and that's just, again, a part of my life. I'm again, Louisiana girl. Music runs in my veins, and I'm not very good at it, but thank God he is. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. And you can use the Polaroids that you see are actually, I did a pilgrimage down the Mississippi River during COVID, actually. 7 stops on 7 full moons, and it was Black and Indigenous women who did this trip together. And it was a life-changing experience in the middle of a pandemic, to be around spiritual leaders on the Mississippi River, learning about social justice from a context, again, with an Indigenous and African perspective. So I gave you all of that backstory, but why am I here? What do I do? So the Water Collaborative bridges resources and information, and to move us forward, particularly on the 3 little bucket areas that you see to the right. We focus on education and advocacy, specifically wholesale education, we call it. So by wholesale, we don't do certifications or we don't teach in schools. We try to help residents navigate and understand how systems work, particularly in Louisiana and in the Gulf South. One thing I've learned when I got this job and even post Katrina is I never knew how complicated the systems were. And if it's complicated for me and I have a degree, can you imagine the resident who is a regular worker, maybe they're a coastal worker, maybe they're just a lawyer or a doctor, and it's not their job to focus on this. So it is quite complicated, and I run into this every day. So I try to help residents, and we try to help residents navigate the systems. And then as a product of that, we create policy measures or policy advocacy where we try to move things or move the needle forward around water justice issues. And then finally is equity. And what we mean equity is making sure all residents reap the benefits of the blue-green economy. Again, you guys are probably very familiar, but a lot of people who benefit from these socioeconomic structures aren't people from Louisiana, and especially our most vulnerable communities, right? Not just BIPOC, but all communities that are struggling, we don't actually reap those benefits. So we try to encourage that through a variety of different programs. So we're really focused on all who are impacted by flood risk. When we did this mission statement, we redid it in 2019, not knowing that the world that we're going to live in is everybody's going to be flooded. And so we've had a lot of other communities come to us asking for support, which we're always have the door open, but we are a small but mighty team. We are a full-time staff of 9, including myself, and we have a few contractors that support us in different ways. But now we have places like Houston and Miami and you name it coming to us looking for support. One thing that we say is our greatest threat and our greatest opportunity is water, right? We know how to do water better than anybody else. And I can say that with the utmost confidence. I have to spend a lot of time in other places in DC. I just had a climate migration summit at Harvard. And I was so proud, but also like kind of sad that like we're the only people who really know how to deal with water at the scale that we're dealing with it. And other places learn from us all the time. And we're also a regional umbrella for all of the urban water and urban water climate adaptation groups. So we have over 1,000 partners, really we do, between our local partners, our national partners, federal, and some international partners. So we are busy, but again, that's how we are able to exchange information. And for those who are in New Orleans, you probably know this, you probably lived it. I'm sorry in advance, it might be a little triggering, but that's what we do. And so then how do we shape all of this? I'm talking all these big things, but how do we actually approach all of our projects? And so collaboration and water justice are at the core of all of our programming, which means that every project has a collaborative partner. And we are always trying to uphold one of our water justice tenets, which is water affordability, water access, water quality, or nature-based solutions or green infrastructure. Those are one of our tenets. So they have to meet one of those criteria. And then all of that can either be about building just relationships, water as an agent of joy, embracing our place in nature, social responsibility and economic opportunities, rights-based water management, and informed decision-making. So that helps us navigate the water world. And I think this is really important because water is extensive and it's large. And I get a lot of people who think that we do all kinds of things. They're like, can you do aquaponics? No. Can you help us save the whales? No. I've had all kinds of things in my inbox. And I'm happy to guide them to the people that do, right? But we kind of focus in this is kind of the way we not only shape our organization and our values, but also decide how we go about doing projects. We've done a lot, and that would be like 5 slides worth of content, but this kind of gives you a snapshot of the work that we did and historically have done. So we started out, we actually wrote the City of New Orleans' first stormwater code and building code, piloted the first ever permeable paving parking lot. We did a watershed moratorium for the Sewage and Water Board, but we actually were successful in getting the whole state to do that watershed moratorium under John Bell Edwards. So if you guys remember, if you had to be in that circumstance, no one got a water bill. It turned off your water for 3 years post-COVID. We're very proud of that. We also did their first ever affordability program, although Sewage and Water Board's a complicated subject that didn't last very long, but hey, small steps, baby steps. We were also part of the Louisiana Watershed Initiative program in 2021. I have to update this. I didn't realize this was an older slide, but we've done a lot since 2023, and I'll talk about those things in the upcoming slides. But this is where we started, right? That was just our first 3 years. And so we've been quite active and very busy. And the thing I should also say is we work with everybody. So some of there's my husband back there. I just realized he's in that photo playing a saxophone. One of our community events we held for WebTech those some of those folks in the picture are actually urban water practitioners. Dr. Angela Chalk, you guys are probably familiar with her. Todd Reynolds with Groundworks New Orleans. And unfortunately, Ubuntu, they are a construction firm, the husband and wife team to the right, but they're moving to Atlanta. So that's really sad. But the point being is that we're working with folks all the time. And some of those folks at the top picture are some of our art program. And actually, the guy in the middle with the short hair is our chair. That's Devin Foyle. He's a planner. So I talked a little about this. I'm going to try to speed through because I want to get to the projects, but our goal is really to bring all these partners together. And why I chose this photo is this is in the Louisiana Library stock image that they have, but it's really about the building of the levees right after the Great Flood of 1927. I really love this photo for two reasons. One, it shows all of the manpower and energy that went into building the levees initially, right? It was people from Louisiana doing the hard work, doing the labor, and really, again, understanding our systems and our water systems. But more so than that, it also talks about thinking about harkening back to the historical work that we also have to do at this organization. So we don't just look at the future, we kind of practice the same COFA model, which is looking at the past, right? Understanding the challenges that we've faced in the past, not just through hurricanes, but systemic built infrastructure failures, historical and systemic violence to Black and Indigenous people, structures of power, because you can't solve the water problem. You cannot solve water justice without being able to understand how we got here in the first place. And so I think we do ourselves a disservice, especially when you're talking about community adaptation, community-led programming. If you're not looking towards the past, if you're not addressing people's personal trauma, it's going to be really, really hard for you to be able to make progress. And I think that's what sets us apart. And I think this is, again, it's just, again, us, we do this exercise, and I kind of want to give you a sense of how we work with community. Again, people never seen the Mississippi River in many of these photos, right? Everybody on this call probably has. But when you're talking to the general community, they're like, what are these photos? And what is that? And what are the tributaries? And how did the Mississippi move? And so we have done multiple workshops that we start from the beginning and work our way up to where we are now. Again, providing context. And I'm walking you through what I would do with a regular community or what my team would do before we get into actual adaptation or strategy building. Again, this is me. Again, I like this photo a lot because, again, part of this job is that I learned about the levee system and its failure, but also even during enslavement days that enslaved people had to build levees. I never knew that. I never knew that. And the reason why I love this, loving is a strong word, right? You don't want to look at violence in this way or trauma in any way. But as a Black woman from New Orleans, but also family from Breaux Bridge and Lafayette, everybody would always talk about the levees will fail. They always fail. It's blown up on purpose. I didn't learn where that historical moment came from until I saw these photos and I read books about it. And that gets to my point about if I'm trying to build work with community and I don't understand the history and how we got here, I can't solve the problem. So by me acknowledging and saying, hey, you know that feeling that you have or those stories that our elders talk about, here's where these stories come from or maybe come from. Let's add context to that. And so it has been a really eye-opening experience for me, but also I've had a lot of people when I do our work go really burst into tears because no one can contextualize what they've been feeling and what they've been hearing. And these are just more of the same, so I'm just not going to talk more, but so I want to point this out. Our lovely Sewage and Water Board is why we're here today, partially, right? The Water Collaborative was founded by a collaboration of folks after Hurricane Katrina. And really the focus was about the levee system and the drainage system. And in that process, we realized that, again, the way we live with water, with the gray infrastructure, the pumps, the canals and the systems that we have, the heavy infrastructure is the reason why New Orleans, as well as much of Southeast Louisiana, is in the position it's in today. Again, I'm preaching to the choir here. But I like the photo because that was the commission group that signed off on Sewage and Water Board. And I find it funny, I always laugh. I said, well, no one in the room who actually lived through that pain of building the levees or the pumping station actually was in that room who made these decisions. And I think it's so important to conceptualize it again today and why it's really important to acknowledge these things, because think about the news in the last 2 weeks, right? Louisiana's been in the news, as you guys know, for better or for worse. But it's always, they see these people, they see the politicians, and they don't see the residents. And not realizing that we aren't the ones in the decision-making room, especially when it comes to infrastructure. And historically, we've never been involved in those conversations in infrastructure. So what we're doing at the Water Collaborative may not feel, or maybe to some it may feel very big, but it is, right? To say that in 100 years or so, we're asking residents to be in the same room making these decisions. That is a challenge and a leap, I think, for a lot of people who are in government, but also people coming into the space. Again, this is all context, and I feel like I just like to add that to like what our history is about. This is a picture of Albert Baldwin Woods, 1913, in the pump station. I laugh because the Sewage and Water Board still uses the same pumps in this photo. They actually got a placard for this. So for those who are keeping up with history, I forgot from what, like a federal recognition of a historical monument, are pumps, the ones that are working like right now. That's how bad the system is. That they gotta, I was like, I don't know if that's a compliment, and I wouldn't necessarily post that on the internet that that's what you got. But I guess the one takeaway, besides there's a lot of negatives to the pumps, right? But there are positives, and they was able to claim over 30,000 acres of land or miles of land. And I'm in Metairie right now, 10 minutes outside the city. I wouldn't be living here if that pump station didn't exist. So there's also the reality that it gave us more ability to create urban sprawl, to create more communities that we wouldn't have to be relegated to being on top of each other in a small space. And then I like to look at these photos again, particularly again, looking back at history, understanding the pain that people have gone through. I lived through Katrina. I fled to Lafayette. And I told the story literally yesterday. I said, the realization I had that I had everything, that everything was gone, was about a week after Katrina in Lafayette, and a community center, Catholic community center, had a bunch of plastic bags on the ground, and they had clothes in it. And they said, well, you can dig through because anything in those bags is yours. And I said, wow, my whole life has been dwindled down to plastic bags and people's old clothes. And that's all I had really for months, is whatever I got out of those bags, because my family didn't have the money to buy me new clothes. They didn't have the money to purchase new things. And that's my story, but everybody's story is important. I like these photos because whether you're 85 or 8 years old, you have a water story. And unfortunately, the water as an agent of joy is disappearing in Louisiana. We have more association with pain in water. We have more association with frustration in water than we do with the joy. And this is a recognition of that. And in order for us to move forward, we have to recognize that. So where are we going now? I gave you the full context. Everybody probably has some story of negativity, but we believe water management and green infrastructure is a scientifically proven pathway to social and economic liberation for all residents of Louisiana and really the globe, in my personal opinion. When I started this work, again, we start thinking about energy usage, or we think about big infrastructure systems that can improve Louisiana. I don't have control over those systems. But what I learned about water management is you can do that individually with your own home. You can do it as a community. And you can do it as a city, you can do it as a state, obviously. But I've never seen direct correlation between someone learning how to do green infrastructure to pulling themselves out of poverty the way I have seen with any other job or workforce. I'm sorry. I've seen literally people who stepped right out of prison, who were incarcerated, get a training or green infrastructure certification training, get a construction training, and they're out the door and they're able to buy their own home in less than a year. There is no other thing to me that can do just that. You guys have probably, or some of you may be aware of all of this, and I don't want to get too much into the weeds, but the point of me showing you this timeline is that we're on the trajectory to do that for Louisiana, right? We know when New Orleans was founded and the gray infrastructure went in, Hurricane Katrina kind of changed that conversation. The Dutch Dialogues and the Urban Water Plan was the first time we really invested in the concept. We were actually a part of the Urban Water Plan output. The Water Collaborative was created as a part of the Dutch Dialogues. And then the Gentilly Resiliency District was the first time there was ever a huge injection of funding for these concepts. Now, if you drive across, not just New Orleans, but again, Jefferson Parish, St. Bernard Parish, Plaquemines Parish, you see nature-based solutions, green infrastructure projects at scale. But what if we could do that for everybody? all the time? What if that wasn't an option, but the default? And that's where I'm trying to get to, is that that's what we're hoping to do for New Orleans. And the reason why I'm saying this as well is look at all these organizations that are invested in this work. And this is a snapshot. This is like 6 people. There's a list of probably 100 that I could easily make that are already investing in that are already working again with, you know, teenagers, incarcerated, formerly incarcerated individuals, people who are just doing job switches. And it's something as simple as a rain barrel to putting in bioswales and green infrastructure to larger planning projects that include, you know, landscape architecture firms or engineering and so on. So I'm kind of skipping over now to how we're going to make that happen and what is the Water Collaborative's role in all that. Remember, we do education, policy, and equity. So we're not, I would love to say I'm over here shoveling. I can shovel, right? I have put in a few trees in my life, but our job is to really make sure that this sector is growing and can make Louisiana the leader in this sector, not a follower. I also want to say this before I jump into all of these, is that it really frustrates me that we always talk about the Netherlands as an example. I really want to dismiss that myth because they're not an example. They've done some great things well, and they've got a lot of, and we learned a lot. That's hence the Dutch dialogues. But if Louisiana can do it, anybody can do it. We have, again, historical trauma. We have federal systems, state systems. We have communities from all different types of ethnic backgrounds, all trying to figure it out under the weight of the climate crisis and with very little funding. So if we could do it, anybody can. So with that being said, our main campaign that we're running for New Orleans is called the Water Justice Fund. And I won't get too deep in the weeds because I'm happy to answer questions about it. But we basically, if successful, would have the first ever community-led, community-created stormwater utility fee. And you guys are probably aware that large landholders and nonprofits in New Orleans specifically do not pay anything towards drainage, $0. So Sewage and Water Board has basically working with half the budget that they need in order to maintain the systems that they have. So that means that the pumping system, the catch basins, canals, they really need $100 million budget, and they're usually working with 50 to 60 million on a regular basis. Well, that's because the Superdome, I love the Saints, Who Dat Nation, pays nothing for drainage. The Convention Center, we go there for events all the time, pays nothing for drainage. Ochsner, they have, you know, buildings all over, $0 in drainage. Those folks would, for the first time ever, if successful, be paying for their fair share. So essentially the amount of impervious surfaces that they have. But what's unique about that, that's not unique. All cities have some version of that. What's unique is the money would not be going back to gray, it'd be going all into green. So we would basically be reforesting New Orleans. There's a community adaptation program that basically allows homeowners to retrofit their home with green infrastructure, as well as solar panels, fortified roofs. The money would also be going to neighborhood scale, green infrastructure, something that many, many people want, as well as insurance and parametric insurance. So we are basically taking that funding to make New Orleans resilient for the next 300 years. The other goal too is to make it a model so other cities in Louisiana could take advantage of this. So we've actually been in contact with Baton Rouge, we've been in contact with Lafayette, but we're still on the ground trying to make it happen. We were hoping to put this on the ballot because it needs to be voted on. But you know, we have a sticky ballot measure, ballot measures this fall. So we're gonna pull that to 2025. So keep an eye out for that, and I'm happy to share more. I'm gonna try to go through all the projects and then leave it open to Q&A when we once we finish. Oh, there we go. There we go, I got a little stuck there. So we also do water quality testing. 2 years ago, we did PFAS testing, or forever chemical testing. I like to just say is the easy way to talk about it. Along the Mississippi River, we tested 130 sites along the Mississippi River and honing in on 30 from Point Coupe all the way down to Clackamas Parish. That was a lot of work. And it was a great project, but unfortunately we did find PFAS levels 7 times higher than EPA regulation. 7, not 2, not 3, not 4, 7. And we have, no surprise to anybody on this call, but in Cancer Alley, that was where those concentrations were most high. So where it didn't come up as PFAS, that doesn't mean that we don't have PFAS. That just means in that study we didn't, because the water moves downriver. So it was quite alarming, and that was the first time anybody had ever in Louisiana tested for PFAS on that scale. We're also doing a second round of PFAS testing this fall, where we're actually going to be testing people's taps to see if it's being filtered out or not. And so that's the next phase of this study. Right there in the white shirt is my policy director. In her shrimp boots, you can't see from there, going all the way into the Mississippi River. We did get stopped by the cops a few times, but they didn't bother us. Speaking of water testing, we're also doing lead line abatement program in New Orleans. So we are actually testing for lead, as well as doing statewide state revolving fund advocacy. Because of the Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, Joe Biden's program, Louisiana is getting millions and millions of dollars for lead line abatement. But it's no surprise, most parishes in Louisiana are not taking advantage of that money at all. So we've been advocating for that. We actually have been testing lead. I don't know if anybody on here lives in New Orleans, but we've actually been testing for lead in New Orleans starting this summer. We've already tested about 30 homes. I'm just letting you guys know this, but we haven't put the report out yet. We'll put the report out in the fall. Sadly, every single home is tested positive for lead. Every home. The lowest amount is 0.3 parts per million, which is technically under EPA regulation, but technically no amount of lead is safe in the body. I mean, you can imagine if you're drinking out of your faucet every single day, 0.3, you know, as long as you've lived 42 years, 30 years, you do the math, there is no safe amount of lead, especially for children under age 5, because that could have cognitive learning disabilities, health issues. We've also found homes that have brand new piping that have lead, and we found some homes that are way, way past EPA regulation. 2 homes tested at 19 parts per million. Currently, the EPA regulation, I think, is at 12 parts per million. And I think they're updating the lead and copper rule this October, so I think it's going to drop to 9 or 10. Either way, it's alarming. And the fact that we've done this study in New Orleans is alarming for obvious reasons, but how many parishes out there have lead and they're not doing anything about it as we speak? So we're hoping to not only get awareness, but again, get cities and states to apply for this free money so they can do abatement. One of the other things we do is affordability. It's more of a federal program, but just to give you some context here, was a study run by The Guardian that looked at income spending for water. New Orleans specifically, because we have the largest utility in the state, spends between 12 to 20% of their income on water. I don't know. Yesterday, I talked to somebody about this, and she said her water bill was $400 a month, and she's a single person. My mom's single. Her water bill ranges between $200 and $300 a month, and it's highly unacceptable. One of the reasons why, and you can see this is actually a quote from the article, found that 79% of low-income residents living in neighborhoods with an unaffordable water burden, which could rise to 93% by 2030 if rates keep climbing. Bills have already doubled over the past decade to $1,268, in 2018. In a city where many rely on bottled water due to concerns about toxins that are very real, which we just talked about, which means they simply cannot afford to pay. And so we've been trying to push Sewage and Water Board to do an affordability program, and it's been an uphill battle, to say the least. As you again, if you live here, you know, metering is also a problem, billing is a problem. And a lot of that has a lot to do with both, there are infrastructure challenges, there are funding challenges, but it also is just the ability to change. And a lot of times we've talked to our partners in other places, and they said, yeah, this is how utilities are. They just don't want to change. And so there needs to be pressure applied, not just from us, but from everybody in the state. Moving on, away from water quality, we also work on community engagement frameworks. We actually did one for CPRA. I realized that I forgot to include that. We did a community engagement framework for CPRA that was approved right before the election. So I don't know where that's gonna go, but it exists, it's out there. But before I was an ED, I did in community engagement frameworks on a regular basis. That was my full-time job, so I brought that to the infrastructure space. So we actually are in a contract CEA agreement with the city of New Orleans to do one for several projects. We're looking at Lincoln Beach, which is a current project that they're doing, but we're also looking at past projects and what went wrong. For those, again, if you're living in New Orleans, you probably know that they had bike lane projects that was basically removed. They had drainage projects that have been removed because of poor engagement. People want to know, they're hungry for it. And when I talked about the Water Justice Fund, I'll just say this briefly, is that we did a 10-part workshop series on the nitty-gritty details of how decisions are made for drainage. I thought no one would sign up, and in 2 weeks, every single slot was sold out. It was a waiting list for an educational program about drainage infrastructure. So this idea that people don't care or that they don't know is a fallacy, and to me an excuse, because it's hard to have conversations. But anyway, we're doing this for the city of New Orleans. We're really excited. We're going to make an app to go with it. Again, happy to talk more detail. Another program we have is the Brackish Artist Collective. So since I've been in this space, being in Louisiana, we have culture bearers and artists and creators all over. And why aren't we engaging them on these subject matters? So we have an artist program where we take them out to coastal Louisiana. We take them out into the waterways and we teach them about water resilience, climate change, sea level rise, all of the major topics. And I could tell you every single one of the artists in these pictures, their lives have completely changed. We did this in partnership with the Restore Coalition, and it was a great experience. In fact, a few of the people, they've said like, they don't even look at the world the same. How could they? And thus their art reflects that change. We're doing a cohort every fall. So we're gonna be starting recruiting in August for the next cohort. And we're really, really excited about it. But it is something to understand that we have to start including the people who have art and culture and other culture bearers, especially in a place like Louisiana. Another program that we have is called Water Flows Forward. It's a design program. This one is kind of an ode to our older past, where we worked with a lot of engineers and landscape architecture firms. We still do this program, although it's been on pause because we're having a hard time finding a welder. So anybody on this call is a welder, we need their number. But essentially, we work with communities to come up with planter boxes that have dual purpose. So this was our first year's winner. Look at that beautiful vegetable garden. How healthy it is. And this is on the side of Claiborne Avenue, where there's straight heat, no trees, and look how healthy that is. That proves how good this planter box is. So this was our first version. It actually holds and stores 40 gallons of water. And that water then waters the plants that you see, or the vegetable garden that you see at the top there. It also has a trellis if you want to grow vine ready plants. And so that was the first prototype. The second one, we actually worked with the Grand Bayou tribe, and we actually making a floating planter box. So it is actually able to float up when sea levels rise, or in an instance like now we have a tropical storm, it would actually prevent their fruits and vegetables from getting any kind of salt water inside of them. So the design is made, but again, if you guys know a welder, we need a good welder who can make it. The last thing I'll have, and I'd love to open it up to questions, is rapid response campaigns. We do a lot of these because we live in Louisiana, and if you're not doing rapid response, it's gonna be hard to do your work. So we did a lot of advocacy around the saltwater intrusion, and we did an awareness campaign online. It was shared millions of times, where we were basically doing daily or every other day updates to the saltwater intrusion. And it was really black and white information. We didn't make it sexy. We just gave people the information and they loved it. And so we did that for literally 3 months. Even now, we still do updates if we get more information about the saltwater intrusion. And so this was a more simple campaign that actually wasn't quite complicated, but it was extremely effective. This one's a more long-term one. We've been working on the insurance crisis for 2 years. One, we had to just understand what the problem was. We now understand the problem. How do we actually fix it? That's the hard part, right? It's getting, again, that change, getting new ideas, investment from the state, as well as federal agencies to be invested in this process. So we belong to several coalitions, but I'm also the co-chair of the National Academy of Science, Engineering, Medicine's Resiliency Roundtable. So this is a part of one of our campaigns, is again to understand the insurance crisis, that we're not alone, and what are the solutions for that. And then lastly, this is a new campaign. I just found this photo online because it hasn't even happened yet. One thing that I thought this photo was hilarious. So I'll leave you guys on something that's funny, but if you guys know, the last election, the governor's election, voter turnout across Louisiana was, abysmal. So we've been talking to folks and like, what are we going to do to get people out to vote for this upcoming election and elections into the future? And we're like, well, let's use our influencers to our benefit. And so we're going to be doing a campaign where we're going to be educating influencers about get out the vote, which is just simple, like, hey, today's election day. Hey, today you need to vote. I realized it was an election, they had an election a few months ago and no one was talking about them. And then I saw these influencers talking about restaurants and their favorite turboiled oysters. And I was like, I don't need to know about turboiled oysters right now. I need you to just tell somebody to go to the polls. And I had posted that on my personal Instagram, not my work. And I had at least 6 or 7 people at least text me or DM me saying, so glad you told me this because I didn't know it was election day and I just went to the polls. How simple is that? Of just educating influencers. These days, election day, this is what's on the ballot. If you want to go further and tell people what your values are, that's your business. But we just want people to know that it's election day. So we're working on that right now. And again, it's a really simple, I think when you're doing rapid response, you don't want to overcomplicate it because you have a very simple goal, get people to the polls. And so that's what we're working on. And I'll stop there. We have other projects that we're working on. I should also, last thing I'll say is that I haven't made this announcement formal, but we've been selected as the EPA Urban Waters Partner, official partner for Lake Pontchartrain Basin. So the work that we're doing here, we're going to be actually not just serving New Orleans, but we'll be serving 12 different parishes in the Lake Pontchartrain Basin. And the other project that I didn't mention, because it's hard to put on a slide, is we actually run a Southern Water Coalition where we work across the South from Texas all the way to the Carolinas to help organize a water justice platform for Southern communities. And the reason why we did that is because my policy director sits on a lot of federal coalitions and the South is never represented. The South doesn't have enough representation but we have the most amount of need. And so what does it mean for us to work together, Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and so on, to say, no, this is what we need and this is the type of investment we want. So I'll stop there. Please, if you want to know more, my email, nolawater.org. You can also sign up for our newsletter on there. Our Instagram is quite popular. But you can follow us on there, and Facebook, and as well as LinkedIn. So thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you so much for that, Jessica. If anybody would like to ask any questions, if you can virtually raise your hand so that I can recognize you to ask your question. I'll start off. I mean, I was right. I got a whole bunch of questions. Some of them I can save for later. But you talked about the PFAS being 7 times higher than what the EPA allows when you guys did the water quality testing along the Mississippi River. After you had that information and you made that public, were they like, thanks, Jessica, appreciate you letting us know that that's a problem? So were there any like, oh, we didn't realize that, so we need to clean it up? What happens next from that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jonathan. It was a funny story. So we did a press conference in St. James Parish, which is where we found the regulation. That was one of the places where it was over 7 times higher. Probably to no surprise to many of you on this call that it was that high in St. James Parish. And we came up with our policy recommendations. We sent it to the media, and as a response, we actually got a Republican to support a bill trying to regulate PFAS in North Louisiana. I'm not going to say his name because, but they were really supportive. This person lost their seat because oil and gas lobbied against this person. And so what I learned about PFAS, particularly in Louisiana, is that who benefits most from being able to not have PFAS regulated to not, because basically the bill was that it was almost like a water usage law. So it wasn't even to me, it wasn't that controversial. If you use so much water, you need to be able to pay this much to go into water pollution mitigation. Real simple, sounds good in theory. It was a Republican who did it. And they basically lobbied against him, and he lost his seat to an oil and gas lobbyist in North Louisiana. And so I think, to your point, it's, again, how do residents take back their community? Because this was not something that should have been controversial. But the fact that oil and gas lobby group could push this person out for doing something And he represented, even though he was Republican, he represented both Democrats and Republicans. He had a flip district. He represented both, so he understood that both communities could have that. So to answer your question, Jonathan, that was exactly what happened after this. Since then, the one good thing is that EPA has actually put some regulation down for PFAS on their own. And states have done a class action lawsuit against several corporations to pay for PFAS mitigation. So things have happened at the federal level, which is good, but Louisiana still doesn't have water usage laws. There's a water code that's been on its way for a long time that's not here yet. And so if we want to make real action in Louisiana to protect ourselves, protect our bodies, protect our families, we need to have water usage laws, and not just for pollution mitigation, but also investment.
Thank you for that. Jessica, you have a question?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, my face is not showing up. This is, oh, let me turn my camera on. There you go. Hi, good afternoon. Jessica, thank you so much for your presentation. I really respect and admire your work, and yeah, look forward to working, or yeah, to hear more from you. And I'm curious about that specifically. Thank you for the question, Jonathan. I saw your presentation, or your organization's presentation about PFAS at a Mississippi River conference, and I've been since trying to find that data, and I don't know if it's publicly available. I've reached out to the Water Collaborative and haven't been able to get in touch with anybody, and I was just wondering if you could point me in the right direction.
Yeah, I could put it in the chat for you, Jessica. Rebecca,
Okay.
who's actually in the photo, second person to the right, she runs that program, and she'd be able to share her data with you.
That would be
We
great.
also
Thank
have
you.
the data. I'm 90% sure the data is in the presentation as well. I mean, in the report, but maybe there's something more specific you're looking for. So after this presentation, I'll be sure to put that in the chat for you.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gary.
I appreciate your presentation. Thanks for sharing that with us. One thing that caught my eye was when you mentioned that y'all have a plan for the next 300 years. I heard that right? And you don't hear that very often, even from some of our state departments. And I wonder about the 300-year plan for the big Mississippi River. Like if y'all are thinking about the possibility of letting the Delta move the way it does over hundreds of years, are y'all dabbling in that, or is it more about the drainage in the city over 300 years?
Yeah, that's a great question, Gary. So it's both. So we are mainly focused on urban water because that's what we can control. And we know politicians are much more likely to vote for something that they can control. We have engaged the Army Corps on this idea. And in fact, you're probably aware they have a nature-based solutions office that is interested in it. Then the Army Corps is a little bit of a struggle, everything everybody is calling those, they're a struggle, right? They have sometimes good intentions, but are really slow to move. I think the concept is not far off. I think the other thing too is that, we've talked about the river diversion projects. And I'm also commissioner for CPRA. So I also, if I could extend this version, which we're planning on doing like 2 or 3 versions of the Water Justice Fund, but the extended version would include what does it mean to have the river diversions be successful and have thriving communities. As someone who's been, listening to communities about the river diversions, but also been an advocate for it, I think there is roots of truth in that, right? I'm afraid of what my community is going to look like. Will there be resources for me? Because historically, Louisiana has not been able to do that, which is why we created that community engagement framework for CPRA to kind of start tackling that conversation. Unfortunately, it's been a little bit derailed, hopefully not forever. But I think that the goal, though, is to do exactly that, Gary, is to include the river diversions in a larger swath of projects and programs that can, again, create real-time resiliency for communities living in those areas. I think the science has told us that we've literally dug ourselves into a hole, figuratively and literally, right? So living without the levees may never be a possibility, at least not in our lifetimes, unless something drastic happens. But what does it mean to let the Mississippi do its job with a little bit of support from infrastructure. But also like, Neptune Pass and Mardi Gras Pass, and letting those projects thrive without interruption. I think, and that's something that, again, we're hoping to include in future plans, and that we've had many, many discussions with an MRD.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. We invite all of you to please stick around for the informal part that is going to last from 1 to 1:30, where you'll be able to ask Jessica other questions, of which I've got a whole list for you coming up too. So, but before that, I'm going to take the screen share back. And one thing that we ask our presenters is, what's your hope for the coast? And so if you're on the call and you'd like to share your hope for the coast in the chat, please do so. But Jessica, if you could share that with us, we'd appreciate that.
Yeah, I kept, this was so hard, Jonathan. I kept thinking about it, like, because I have a lot of hopes. I have a booklet of hopes, but I think, so fun fact, I share a birthday with Huey P. Long. I am definitely not Huey P. Long. But I liked his whole concept of every man a king, or a queen in our case. I really want Louisiana residents to be more engaged. Like, I envision a world where we are engaged at every level and not pass, we are just passerbys in political processes, because I think there's a history, again, I talked about it, the trust and the apathy and the frustration and the violence. Everybody's disengaged. Even in Lafayette, I talked to my Cajun and my Creole family. None of them vote. None of them vote. And I said, why don't you vote? And they said, they don't care about me. They don't care about us, which is not true. And it hurts my heart, even when we look at elections. Every time you see, it's a few thousand people compared to millions of people in the state. So I think if people, because when you really start to talk to residents in Louisiana, we don't think the way our representatives think.
Yeah.
We think about each other the way more than some of our, not all of our representatives, but many of them do. If we banded together and really took care of each other, we would have such a healthier community in Louisiana. So that's my hope.
I appreciate that. I really do. I am also so thankful that you exist and you are doing the work that you were called to do. Every time I listen to you, I am more inspired, and I appreciate that, because again, like I said earlier, this isn't always joyful. It's very important, and it's important to find the joy in that work, but it's also wonderful to rally around each other and find folks like you that are inspirational, that can give people hope to do the work, right? So thank you so much for being with us today. Thank you for your presentation. And again, everybody, please stick around. In just a few minutes, we'll be in the informal part of our conversation, and you can ask Jessica some more questions. So thank you so much again, Jessica, for being with us today. All right, so moving on, we've got information on our position statement. If you are new to our group and you would like information on that, you can follow that QR code that will take you to the position statement, or you can go to louisianafolklore.org. We also have working groups that do that are connected to this organization. And if you would like more information about them and attend one of their meetings, that's all here. We've got Culture and Coastal Planning that meets Monday, June 24th at 2 o'clock. Amy's with us here today, and she is also looking for a co-convener to help convene that group. The Louisiana French Language Group meets Tuesday, August 13th at 6. And the convener there is Ivy Matthew, Preparing Receiving Communities. This is going to be coming up next Tuesday, 12:30. There's a hybrid meeting in person and man, maybe I need to have either more coffee or less coffee. I'm not sure. So that's going to be an in-person and virtual meeting. And please check the chat for more details on that. The conveners are Tracy Birch and Haley Blakeman. There's the Artists and Tradition Bearers group that meets Tuesday. Sorry, nope, that's Wednesday, June 26th at 7 p.m. The conveners are Lola and Mark. Protecting Collections, Thursday, June 27th at 2. The convener there is PUD. So hopefully you guys can participate in one of those meetings. Sorry for it's a lot of words to read, right? We hope you'll join us next month for our gathering with Dr. Quentin Fontenot. He will be presenting Preserving a Part of Our Cultural Heritage. He is the president and founding member of the Cajun Music Preservation Society, so we're very excited to have him join us. That's going to be Friday, July 19th at 12 noon, so we hope to see you guys then and there. If anybody has any announcements that they would like to make before we move on to the informal part of the presentation, if you just raise your hand, and if not, we can move right along. All right, so thank you again so much for being with us. This concludes the formal part of our presentation.